Hi, I'm Venus O'Hara and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing a very personal video with you, a personal experience. And the title of this video is Why I Stopped Having Therapy. Oh my God, well it's something I've just decided to stop recently, and I wanted to share my own experience about this because I do think that, I was looking online as well about people who were sharing their experience about why they stopped therapy, and I wanted to share my own perspective. So anyway, let me just start by saying why I started therapy in the first place. Well, I actually have this fantastic health insurance. It's private health insurance, and I realised that I could see a psychologist at a very good price, and I thought, why not? Because over the years I've always felt that I wanted to do some kind of emotional detox for various reasons. The main reason could be probably my attachment style, which is very kind of an avoidant attachment style, and this is something that's kind of like started in my childhood, and it's kind of like now as an adult there are some like real repercussions of having this attachment style. I'm very kind of like a commitment phobe. I tend to kind of distance myself from people even though I crave connection so much, so it seems to be like a bit of a contradiction really. So that's something I've always wanted to kind of sort out, so to speak. And also I have had sometimes when I'm very stressed, it manifests as an overactive bladder, and sometimes it can be very obsessive. At night time I can go to the loo many times, and it's called nocturia, so it's like nighttime urination, like obsessive overactive bladder. And it's not really physical because I'm actually, my blood, there's nothing wrong with my bladder. It tends to be whenever I'm stressed, so that's how stress is manifested in my body. So anyway, those were the reasons why I started to have therapy, and I thought, why not? It's now or never. And I started going just, I think it was April. So as you know, if you've been following me, I had a very difficult time earlier this year. I was in hospital with suspected COVID, pneumonia, and then after that I had the post-viral fatigue, which was just, oh my God, so hard. And then I moved apartments as well. So I had a lot of changes going on in my life. So I thought, why not? Let's treat the emotional side of what I need to treat as well. So what I found was I went along to a psychologist who's included in my private health care, and that was good and bad. For example, the good side was it was accessible, it was a good price, but the bad side was that I couldn't really specify what kind of therapy I wanted, and it was just talk therapy. And I think here in Barcelona maybe things are not as advanced as in some parts of the world, and talk therapy, just going and talking without any real objective about why you're there. And this for me it was great at the beginning to kind of get some things off my chest, but then as time progressed it just seemed to be, I don't know, like a Woody Allen film. You're just talking about yourself, and there's no feedback, no objectives, no kind of what's the word, no kind of direction or feedback or anything. So yeah, it was kind of like going there without any objectives at all about, well, I did talk about what I wanted to resolve when I got there, but there was no kind of plan about how to resolve these issues. It was just, But anyway, I did find it helpful actually the first few sessions to kind of get things off my chest. And what I did in parallel is that I've done so many things to kind of improve my life over the last few months. I mean, for example, my whole life is therapy, which is a great thing to say and to live. For example, I don't think you should just have 1 hour of therapy a week. You should be having therapy all day, every day. For example, I joined the gym, I eat really healthily, I went completely organic. I started making more of an effort in my social life, because that was one of the issues. I felt kind of disconnected from people, so I've made a massive effort to actually reconnect with people. I have now become, I kind of like went through a kind of breakup as well, so I've kind of like done a lot of things that needed to be done in my life. And sometimes it got to a point where I had a therapy session, I was thinking, oh, I'd rather go to the gym actually. I'd rather be doing something else. I felt like it was kind of like holding me back. And also, if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I read fantastic books. I mean, a lot of the books I'm reading are kind of in the self-help category. So that's always that they help me so much. And I don't think it's important what you read, it's what you do after you close the book. And also in the podcast that I've just created, the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast, I'm actually interviewing a lot of authors who are authors of self-help books and lifestyle, etc. So I have a lot of interviews that I've already recorded, and they will be released over the next couple of months. So I just feel that I'm already having I'm in a privileged position that I'm having private consultations almost with people who are very skilled, who are very successful in the field of self-help, psychology, etc. So yeah, it was just really, really good. And also in terms of my motives for having therapy, the person that I was seeing didn't really have much of a grasp of those issues. So for example, with my nocturia, my overactive bladder, she might say sometimes in the sessions the thing that happens to you without really saying the word. And me as a linguist, I think language is so important. Language gives power to things that can be good and bad, but to kind of like step over and kind of like not really say the words of what's happening to me, it kind of like made me feel misunderstood completely, actually. But also in the time that I've been going to therapy, I've actually started to sleep very well. There's nothing wrong with my bladder anymore. I got the best bed I could find in my new apartment here. I sleep the whole night through. And I'm dreaming. I'm just very comfortable. I don't have any issues with sleep like as I really did before. I was going to the loo a lot, just obsessed with this kind of overactive bladder. Whereas I think, and it's all fine now. And I think if you're going to have therapy, you have to make sure that the therapist you're seeing is qualified in the issue that you want to resolve. That's something that I really feel strongly about now, because I'm not against therapy at all. I think everyone should do therapy at some point in their lives, and I will definitely go back to therapy at some point. But I do know now, what I've learned is that I'm going to go with some clear objectives and make sure that the therapist knows what those objectives are and that they are actually qualified and experienced to actually help me in those fields. I think that's something that I have learned now, and I didn't want to spend any more money or time on this. And also I got to a point where I started to reduce the frequency of the sessions, and the weeks where I didn't go, I just felt completely fine and kind of almost liberated. And I just didn't feel like I needed it or that there was anything missing from my weekly schedule. And the times I did go, it was kind of pleasant in the sense that, it's kind of cool to speak about yourself to someone who's impartial for an hour a week, even though I did kind of want some feedback and guidance sometimes. But I got my feedback and guidance from my own intuition and other things I was doing. But yeah, I think it's partly an ego thing as well, to be kind of like talking about yourself for an hour. So that can be good, but do I want that to become a lifestyle? Probably not, because it's expensive, really. And I think I'm more interested now in kind of discovering or different types of therapy, or maybe even coaching. So that could be something I'm going to be looking into at some point as well. Let me see if I've got any more notes here. Yeah, so when to stop. I actually did Google this a lot just before I made the decision to end it. But I kind of knew in my heart and soul that it was time to stop. And my intuition was telling me this is just pointless, and it's expensive, really. It all adds up, even though it was a good price. You're just thinking, is it worth paying, even though if it's a good price for something that's not really kind of doing what you would hope. I don't know if that's clear or not. But anyway, I looked this up about when to stop, and a lot of people were saying, or some psychology journals were saying, to kind of reduce the sessions. And that's what I did actually. I did actually go to every 2 weeks, which was a great thing to do, because that's how I could tell that I didn't really need that support system. I already had kind of like a lot of great things happening for me anyway. And also it said something like that suddenly the symptoms that you went there for are no longer present. And that definitely was in my case. I don't think my attachment style is suddenly resolved by any means. Or the nocturia could definitely come back when I'm stressed again. But the circumstances I'm living right now are very good, and those symptoms are not present at the moment. But if they do come back, I would think I'd rather go to someone who's a bit more, let's say, in the cognitive behavioral therapy field, someone who's going to give me some tools to actually deal with the present. And speaking of the present, I really believe that the present is the most important thing. I think there's too much obsession, in my personal opinion and experience, on looking at the past and the traumas when you're going to talk therapy and stuff, or psychoanalysis. I just think, yes, it's true that many of the traumas we have, or our attachment styles, or whatever it is we are living, can stem, or probably do come from our childhoods, but not everything. We can't just live in the past and revisiting traumas all the time, because you can actually start to identify with that rather than moving on. And that's what I really feel. And also I am, in terms of the spiritual work I'm doing, everything is, there's so much more emphasis on mindfulness and the present moment. For example, I've just been on a yoga retreat, which is another great therapy thing to do. I highly recommend that yoga retreats to anyone. You can do a lot of healing on those retreats. But there's this retreat I went to, and on the website it said, just think of it, it's this place is like Tom's Midnight Garden. And Tom's Midnight Garden was a series that I saw when I was a child, and I absolutely loved it. It's about this little boy who he wakes up at night and opens this door, and he goes into this incredible garden which is not present during the day. So anyway, I was curious, and I went to YouTube just to actually see Tom's Midnight Garden again, and it wasn't how I remembered it. The boy didn't look like how I remembered it, the characters were not like how I remembered them, and even the garden was not like how I remembered it. So I do think your memory can really be distorted with time. So when we're going back to revisit the past and traumas, things might not have happened how you think they have. I think that's yeah, and it just gives too much power to the past. But speaking of the past, I did read this book actually when I was recently, because I interviewed Dr. Andrea Pennington for my podcast, and the interview will come out soon. And this book really grabbed my attention, The Real Self-Love Handbook. And I do feel that I did learn more from reading this book than what I did in 4 months of therapy, because there are incredible exercises here. You're not just talking and like wallowing in self-pity. It's kind of like taking action. And there was an exercise, I've just opened the page on here right now, My Peak Experiences. And this is a kind of much more empowering way to look at the past. And for me, my peak experience in my life was probably the time I lived in Paris. And although it wasn't perfect at all. It wasn't perfect at all. I still remember some of the things that I struggled with at the time. It was a time in my life when I laughed the most. I had an incredible group of friends, and I had a great boyfriend, and he was Colombian, and he kind of gave me Latin fever, and that's why I'm in Spain. So it was a really life-changing moment for me. And here there's an exercise that says peak experience. So for me that would be Paris. How I made it happen and which strengths were active. How I made it happen? Well, I started going to French lessons for foreigners. And which strengths? Well, I was curious, and I took action. And why I did it, what motivated me to do it? Well, I was actually lonely. I was living in a studio apartment, and I was a lot younger than my work colleagues, and I just felt so lonely, and I was driven by loneliness to go to these French classes for foreigners, and that's how my peak experience, the best experience of my life, happened. So you just think that's an incredibly empowering way to look at suffering or trauma, almost, that if you are going through a bad time, you could be a couple of steps away from a peak experience. I do believe that pain is one of our greatest guides in life. It's kind of like a guide to say, this is not the right path, change something. And by making those changes, you could be on the verge of something absolutely incredible. Yeah, and there's also a thing about making a timeline of your life. So I've kind of like really connected with who I am and who I've always been, rather than going back to certain things that were painful for me in my childhood. I just think, why give those things so much power? I think it's good to talk about things, but you can't be doing that every week when you're a lot older. You've got to kind of move on and just know who you are. And Yeah, this was a good one as well. Timeline of life events. I did that as well, which is quite cool. All the places I've lived and school and friends I've had, and I've definitely noticed some patterns that have been present in me through my whole life. So I did find this book. It was looking at the past, but in a much more empowering way. Highly recommend it. I'm going to leave a link to this book in the description below. Let me see if I've shared anything else. Okay, red flags of therapy. For me, I did find that sometimes when I was talking about my life, and anything could pop up really, but sometimes when she kind of spoke, or kind of like made a summary, or she spoke to me, and as if she was summarizing what I just said, I was thinking, oh my god, you didn't understand anything. So for me now, I think, I don't know, it was just like, I think you gotta listen to your intuition and think, oh my god, does this person really understand me or understand my problem? And I was just thinking, no, even though she's very nice, and the good side is, someone has spent a lot of time listening to me, making notes about me, and I do appreciate that. But yeah, just talking to someone about your life for an hour in a week, when everything is kind of going quite well. I do think even though things are going well in your life, it can be a good thing to do therapy. But I did read this incredible article in the Daily Mail, I know it's terrible, this week about therapy, and it was some women sharing their experience about therapy, and they said that they got trapped in, what was it called, analysis paralysis. I've never heard that term before, but I thought it was an excellent way of describing how you can get caught up in analysing things without moving forward. And I did do therapy actually when I was younger, when I was at university, and that was completely free, so I didn't have any kind of like feeling of I'm paying for this. I just went along to I went to 3 different psychologists actually, and at the time it was kind of maybe going over childhood stuff, and how it was just my first time leaving home and seeing my life from the outside, because I think when you're in a family you think that everything is that's what normal is, and then when you kind of move away from that, you see it with a different perspective. And so I had a lot of things to kind of like get through in my life. But then I did find that with time, these psychologists were kind of like relating everything I was living back to a childhood event, and I was thinking, nah, not everything is related to the childhood. So, some things are, a lot of things are, but not everything, and you can't just be looking back all the time. You've got to move forward, and that's why if I do therapy again, which I probably will, I'm really up for actually doing more therapy at some point when I find someone or something that's going to be helpful for me. I want to have very clear objectives about how many sessions I want and what I want to achieve in that time. And I think you can never know yourself too much, so you can always learn more and more about yourself, and that's definitely a good thing. So yeah, I am fine without it, and that's about it really. Have I let's see if I've spoken about everything. Yes I have. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Have you done therapy? Do you recommend it? Was it a good experience? And what if you ended it? Why did you end it? That would be interesting as well to find out. And anyway, I'm going to leave a link to this book below. And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And thank you for listening to me, just like therapy. Anyway, if you have any suggestions for new videos, don't hesitate to contact me at venus@venusohara.org. And see you very soon.